One of the greatest quarterbacks to ever grace the football field, a legend in New Orleans history, often compared to the divine Christ. Drew Brees was one of the best things to ever happen to the Saints. He stood by them in tough times. Through his rookie season, going through rebuilding the city of New Orleans and the team's identity after the terrible effects of Katrina. He stood by them through Bountygate, where the team had their reputation ruined. He stood by them when he had 3 years of his prime ripped away from him in 2014 to 2016. They weren't able to make the playoffs because the team around Brees wasn't good enough to compete, even though he gave them 3 5,000 yards and 30 touchdown seasons. They took a risk in signing him in 2006, and he wanted to repay them for their loyalty. The only problem is, when Drew Brees needed the Saints to support him, they gave him absolutely nothing. As he got older and needed a better team to be put around him, all the front office and coaches could do is turn their back on him. Let's explore Drew Brees' final season and how, with the right investment in the team around him, he could have added another ring to his already Hall of Fame career. If you love in-depth storytelling on moments in sports history, this is the right channel for you. I dig into mostly football, basketball, and baseball history across all time periods, talking about the moments in sports history no one else really is. Subscribe now and join my community of fans who love sports beyond the box score. Let's go back to Drew Brees' final year of his career. Going into the 2020 season, it wasn't official, but we all had a really good idea that this would be Brees' final season in the NFL. And if you were a true fan of football, you would have loved to see Brees win one more and cement his legacy on the way out, Peyton Manning style. And this team, on paper, had the pieces to get there. On the offensive side, you had Alvin Kamara in the backfield. At 25 years old in the prime of his running back career, he was expected to be the engine of this offense. They had two solid weapons on the outside. Michael Thomas, who was Offensive Player of the year prior, and a 3-time Pro Bowler, paired alongside Emmanuel Sanders, who came in to be a deep threat option to complement the strengths of Thomas. 3 elite options around Brees, and the offensive line was pretty elite too. 3 All-Pros in Teron Armstead, Ryan Ramczyk, and Andres Pete, a rising star in Eric McCoy, and a rookie first-rounder in Cesar Ruiz playing right guard. The defense was legendary too. Cam Jordan leading the D-line, having 15.5 sacks on the 2019 season. Demario Davis being one of the best linebackers in the world going into 2020, and Marshawn Lattimore being an elite corner, coming off a 57 tackle, 1 interception, and 1 fumble season in 2019. The pieces were there for Brees to make one final push. On paper, at least. The season opened up against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers in the Hall of Fame game, and right from the jump, the season took a left. During the third quarter of the game, Michael Thomas suffered a high ankle sprain while being tackled. This injury would sideline him until week 9. They were still able to come away with the win against the Bucs and start the season 7-2 through the first 9 games without Thomas. Drew Brees showed very little signs of slowing down, having 2,164 passing yards and 18 touchdowns in a 74% completion percentage, leading the league by a decent margin. Head coach Sean Peyton was doing a great job at keeping Brees untouched too, having Brees focus mainly on short yardage throwing the ball. Brees was only sacked 11 times through the first 9 games of the season, having the least among all starting quarterbacks in the league. There was one real problem though. The Saints' new number 1 wideout with Thomas being sidelined was Emmanuel Sanders. Sanders was a deep threat, and Brees was 41. He did not have the arm power anymore to really show Sanders' strengths, so Sanders only had 417 yards halfway through the season. If he didn't go for 122 yards in week 1 against the Chargers, his numbers would have looked atrocious. It's not his fault, he just didn't have a quarterback who played to his strengths. Even with this small problem, the Saints were still on top of the NFC South at 7-2 and looking to make a strong playoff push. That all changed when Brees went down. Week 10, down 10-3 in the second quarter against the 49ers, Brees took a big hit on a sack by Kentavious Street, but was able to get right back up. The problem was it was later revealed that he had 11 broken ribs and a collapsed lung. At age 41, he still played another 8 minutes in this game before being taken out in the second half. This injury was going to sideline him for a while though, and with their Hall of Famer out for a significant amount of time and the Bucs right on their heels, who would the Saints rely on? The answer was the Swiss Army knife, Taysom Hill. Taysom actually did very good in his 4 starts that year, going 3-1 and throwing 4 touchdowns. The game plan was still to go through Alvin Kamara, but Taysom did enough to keep the lead in the NFC South. The issue was, in Week 15, they went back to Brees. Why? What significant upside did a 41-year-old Brees give to you over Taysom Hill? He was keeping you in the lead for the NFC South, even extending it from 1 game to 3 games. The Bucs were 8-5 going into Week 15. Sure, you could argue they were fighting Aaron Rodgers and the Packers for the number 1 seed, but was that really worth it in the long run? Reports were coming out that Brees was not fully healthy when he came back into the starting role, but even why would you possibly risk him to get injured for the rest of the season at this part of his career? Just sit him the last 3 games and prepare him for the playoffs. But they played him, still fighting for the number 1 seed, and Brees went 2-1 to finish the season, capturing the 2 seed to face the Bears in the wild card. The wildcard game against the Bears was an easy win for the Saints, without Brees needing to break a sweat. I really don't want to talk about this game much because if you remember, it was shown on Nickelodeon and Mitch Trubisky was the MVP of the game. The Bears should have never been in the playoffs, and you could have easily gotten there and won this game with Taysom as your starting QB. And that brings us to the final game of the legendary career of Drew Brees, where the Saints and head coach Sean Peyton truly turned their back on their superstar. January 17th, 2021, 6:40 Eastern Time. I remember exactly where I was when this game was happening. I was over at my buddy Adam's house, who runs the Fumble Rooski podcast. Side note, I'll link their channel below. Seriously, go check them out if you love football podcasts. The bottom line is Drew Brees got killed that day. My wrestling fans, remember the famous, "I'm sorry, I love you"? That was Tom Brady to Drew Brees that day. The game started slow, just 3 field goals through the first quarter and a half, with the Saints holding a narrow 6-3 lead. But momentum swung when Drew Brees threw a costly interception to Sean Murphy-Bunting, who returned it to the Saints' 3-yard line. 1 play later, Tom Brady hit Mike Evans on the goal line fade, putting the Bucs up 10-7. Sean Payton surprisingly answered with creativity, an end-around trick play that had Jameis Winston launching a 56-yard bomb to Traquan Smith. It was a beautiful design and swung the lead back to New Orleans. After a field goal before halftime and a Brees touchdown early in the third, the Saints led 20-13. But Brady responded. A touchdown pass to Leonard Fournette and a field goal midway through the fourth put Tampa Bay on top 23-20, setting the stage for a possible amazing finish from Brees. Drew Brees still had possession and time. Anything is possible for this legend of the game. He then threw a pick to Devin White, allowing the Bucs to get the ball in the red zone, leading to a Tom Brady quarterback sneak and score. And down 10, with no choice but to throw the ball, Brees throws his 3rd pick of the game, cementing the loss. You can argue if this pick was Brees' fault. I say it was a really bad throw in desperate situation. After telling Jameis Winston this was his team now, spoiler, Drew, this did not end well. And an emotional moment between him and Tom Brady playing catch with their kids on the field, this was the end of Drew Brees' career. Now, you might be asking me, Shells, how did the Saints organization turn their back on Brees? Well, it happened 3 separate times throughout that season. Time number 1, the trade deadline. Michael Thomas had been out for a while, and no one else was able to step up as Drew Brees' number 1 target. Emmanuel Sanders was a deep threat, like I said before, and Drew couldn't throw over 30 yards consistently anymore. They needed to go out and trade for another route runner who could come in and support Drew Brees if Thomas got injured again. Here are just a few names they could have gone after at the trade deadline. Jamison Crowder from the Jets, Tim Patrick from the Broncos, Randall Cobb from the Texans, Chris Conley from the Jags, Richie James from the Niners, Chad Beebe from the Vikings, Mohamed Sanu from the Lions, or AJ Green if you wanted a 1-year rental. The only player they brought in was linebacker Quan Alexander. Great pickup, but he can't play wideout. Out of all those wideouts outside of AJ Green, you can get every single one with a 2021 third-round pick to go help Brees. They sat on the sidelines and did nothing to help Brees get more weapons. Secondly, Brees' injury. When Brees went down, Taysom Hill was serviceable, like I said before. He wasn't otherworldly and wasn't going to threaten Drew's job, but he kept you winning games. He was able to come in and get a job done for 4 games. Your last 3 games were against the Chiefs, Vikings, and Panthers. Yes, they scored 52 against the Vikings and they beat the Panthers, but Taysom could have done that too. Alvin Kamara scored 6 touchdowns that day against the Vikings, while Drew Brees had 0 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. And come on, anyone is beating the 5-11 Teddy Bridgewater-led Panthers. There's no reason for Brees to play those games. Now, we'll never know what conversations happened in the coach's office if Drew went in there and demanded he played every game of his final season, which is honestly incredibly possible. But even so, you rest your 41-year-old quarterback before the playoffs and make sure he's 100% back to what he could be. He broke 11 ribs and collapsed a lung, for Christ's sake, and you're putting him out there a month later. Completely irresponsible from Sean Peyton and the Saints front office. Lastly, the final game of Brees' career against the Bucs. Drew didn't have it that night. The Bucs' game plan was simple. You needed to get ahead and stop the short pass, and they did exactly that in the second half. Before the fourth quarter, Brees was struggling too. He had an okay first quarter, but in the second and third quarter, he was terrible. He wasn't hitting his passes accurately, and he was being asked to do much more than usual. The thing that makes me so pissed off is Sean Payton saw what was happening and knew they needed to add the deep ball into some aspect of the game. Remember the Jameis Winston trick play? Payton made that adjustment in order to get the Saints the deep ball when they needed it. But after this play, Sean didn't do shit. For the third and fourth quarter, he left Brees out there to die. Now, this is only my opinion, but he could have had the balls to take Brees out of the game when he's actively losing you the game. You have not only one, but 2 serviceable quarterbacks on your bench in Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston, good to go, both who are capable of spacing the field. They needed to either do that or heavily rely on Alvin Kamara, who had 18 rushing attempts in that game. This was a guy who had almost 1,000 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns. He could take you to the promised land if you gave him 30 carries that game. Either way, Sean Payton in the second half put his thumb up his own ass and sat there while Drew Brees kept them out of the game. Drew was left on an island, left to try and win the game by himself. At 41 years old, he wasn't that player anymore. And it's a damn shame that he had to go out like this. Now, you could say I'm being harsh, but let's look at a similar situation from a few years before. Peyton Manning and his Super Bowl winning season with the Broncos. Yes, the Broncos had one of the greatest defenses of all time that season, but the Saints had a top 5 defense in 2020. Drew Brees almost threw for 3,000 yards, and Peyton Manning was ass. 2,400 yards and 17 picks to pair with 9 touchdowns. So how did the Broncos do better for Peyton? The Broncos had Demaryius Thomas and Brandon Marshall, 2 big route runners who can stretch out to catch an errant Peyton Manning throw. Drew Brees had half a season on Michael Thomas, but the biggest thing was the management of the old quarterbacks. Peyton Manning was injured in week 10 of the season with a tear in his foot. Sounds kind of the same if you ask me. You know what they did? They sat him for the rest of the regular season. They didn't try and rush him back to get him to play the last 2 to 3 games of the regular season. They let him get back to 100% for the playoffs. And it paid off. If the Saints managed Drew Brees like the Broncos did Peyton Manning in 2015, we are quite possibly looking at Drew Brees riding into the sunset with one more Super Bowl win. It's a damn shame, man. Thank you guys for watching this video. It means the world to me that you would click on a video from my small channel. Subscribe if you like the content. God bless each and every one of you. And I will see you guys next time.